Reborn on the Temple Road. I watched coldly as bandits dragged my stepmother away. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. The dull thud of the blade cutting through the carriage shaft, along with the panicked neighing of the horses, pierced my eardrums instantly. I snapped my eyes open, my body crashing violently against the carriage wall due to the rough shaking. The intense pain cleared my mind momentarily. What I saw was an overturned sandalwood table, pastries scattered everywhere, and Lin Wanrong, curled up on the other side of the carriage, pale and trembling violently. In my ears were the desperate screams and harsh, raucous laughter of the guards. The pungent smell of blood seeped through the cracks in the carriage curtains. I stared at my own trembling hands. My fingertips weren't damaged by severed tendons, and my skin wasn't deathly pale. I was back. I had truly returned to the 14th year of giant pain. On the third day of the third month, the day when the women of the Song family went to Hanshan Temple to offer prayers, only to encounter bandits on Panlong Road. Wanming. Wanming. Lin Wanrong's well-maintained hands, painted with bright Lacoste polish, reached out toward me like those of a dying person grasping at a piece of wood. Her eyes were filled with terror, and her voice trembled uncontrollably. Mother is scared. Please come here. To Mother's side. It was the same in my past life. She called me over in the most motherly tone. But the moment the bandit leader slashed the curtain aside, she unleashed incredible strength. Gripping my wrist tightly, she used me as a human shield and shoved me right at that bloody knife. Meanwhile, taking advantage of the moment the bandit was distracted by me, she scrambled out of the car. Because of her push, I was captured by the bandits and suffered endless torment in their dark lair. It was worse than death. This time, looking at her hypocritical face, I suppressed the overwhelming hatred surging in my heart. A faint, barely noticeable cold smile curled on my lips. I didn't approach her meekly as I did in my past life. Instead, I quietly moved back into the shadows at the far end of the carriage, using the terrified maidservant Mu Jin as a shield behind me. Mother, please don't panic. The guards can hold their own. My voice was very soft, even somewhat soothing. But the moment Lin Wanrong's hand was about to touch my sleeve, I coldly stepped back. Just then, a loud shout came from outside. You little brat in the carriage, get out now. Before the voice faded, there was a harsh sound of silk tearing. The heavy, patterned carriage curtains were rudely pulled apart from the outside by a blood-stained, broad-bladed sword. The blinding sunlight poured into the dim carriage. What appeared before their eyes was the bandit leader Lei Lai's face, covered in flesh and blood. His eyes gleamed with predatory greed, and his gaze immediately settled on Lin Wanrong, who was closest to the door. Lin Wanrong let out a scream that seemed to tear her throat apart. Extreme fear made her lose her mind for a moment. Instinctively, she turned around and reached out with both hands toward me, trying to pull me in front of her to shield herself from the danger. Already prepared, I watched her desperate attempts to grab me with cold indifference. Instead of avoiding her, I bent my knees. The moment her hand was about to catch me, I took advantage of the tilt in the carriage caused by external forces, and gently but firmly pushed my knee into her waist. The force applied was perfectly precise. Lin Wanrong was already unsteady on her feet. With my push, she completely lost her balance. Her attempt to push or grab something went awry, and she rushed uncontrollably toward the open car door, a gift delivered right to my doorstep. Lei Lai sneered. With his fan-like hands, he grabbed Lin Wanrong's meticulously styled hairdo. Ah! Lin Wanrong let out a shrill scream. She clung desperately to the door frame with both hands. Her neatly trimmed nails broke off instantly, leaving bloodstains on her hands. She struggled desperately, and her luxurious silk clothes were torn apart in the struggle, revealing the messy undergarments underneath. At that critical moment when Lei Lai was roughly dragging her outside, her once gentle and dignified eyes were now bloodshot, staring intently at me, hiding in the shadows. She tore off her mask of hypocrisy and screamed frantically, Wanming, I'm your mother. Save me, hero. Please look carefully. There's another person in the carriage. She's younger than me. She's the eldest daughter of the Song family. She's worth more. This vicious bite sounded especially harsh on the dragon path, where swords clashed loudly. I held hibiscus tightly against my chest, covering the maid's cry with one hand. Sitting quietly at the back of the carriage, I showed no sign of panic. Instead, I stared at Lin Wanrong with a cold gaze, as if looking at a dead person. Lei Lai seemed annoyed by Lin Wanrong's noise. He didn't even take another look into the dark carriage. Instead, he kicked Lin Wanrong in the chest and cursed. Who the hell cares whether you're a legitimate daughter or a concubine's child? First, grab someone who can be sold for money and take her with us. Then, like dragging a livestock ready for slaughter, he grabbed Lin Wanrong by her hair and threw her roughly onto the horse's back. Lin Wanrong's desperate cries, along with the sound of horse hooves, gradually faded into the depths of the dense forest. Only when those agonized sounds completely disappeared into the woods did I slowly release my hand from covering the hibiscus plant. The fighting outside the carriage gradually subsided. It seemed that the remaining bandits were looting several wagons filled with money and offerings. Their heavy leather boots made a disgusting, slippery sound as they stepped through the blood-stained mud, slowly approaching the carriage where I was. The footsteps finally came to a halt in front of the broken carriage shaft. A dirty, large hand quickly grabbed the edge of the half-closed curtain, just as that greedy face was about to peek into the carriage. I didn't hesitate. I pulled out the red gem-encrusted hairpin from my bun, crossed over the overturned table, and, using all my strength, thrust the sharp pin deep into the rump of the horse pulling the carriage. Hiss! The steed let out a piercing, agonized cry. In pain, its front hooves leaped into the air as it charged forward frantically. The robber who tried to lift the curtain was caught off guard. He was flung out of the carriage by the violent shaking, letting out a muffled cry of pain. The carriage rushed forward like a wild beast gone mad, careening along the rugged path. As the wheels rolled over rocks and debris, the carriage emitted a screeching sound, as if it were on the verge of breaking apart. Outside, the robbers cursed in anger and screamed in panic as they tried to dodge. But I had no time to pay attention to them. I clung tightly to the window bars, and just as the carriage was about to plunge off a gentle slope at the edge of the road, I grabbed Hibiscus by the sleeve. Jump! I let out a low cry, grabbed Hibiscus, whose legs had gone weak with fear, and rolled out of the open carriage door. The out-of-control carriage plummeted down the cliff, and we tumbled violently down the slope covered with thick grass and thorns. Sharp grass blades cut my back hands, and the tremendous force made my internal organs churn violently. It wasn't until my back hit a thick camphor tree that this terrifying fall finally came to an end. I let out a muffled groan, forcing down the metallic taste in my throat. Ignoring my disheveled hair and mud-stained skirt, I quickly grabbed the still-conscious Hibiscus and rushed deeper into the dense forest. The forest was vast. The bandits were busy looting, so they likely wouldn't search the lower areas for anyone anytime soon. But I had to find evidence that could prove my innocence in this matter. If I returned to the Song family's residence in such a sorry state, without solid proof, even if I remained unharmed, that invisible reputation net would still strangle me to death. We wandered through the bushes for what felt like an eternity, until a very regular, thunderous noise broke through the treetops. Approaching from afar, it was the sound of soldiers' iron boots crushing fallen leaves, accompanied by the snorting of war horses and the harsh clinking of armor. Regular army. I suddenly stopped in my tracks and looked through the layers of branches ahead. Not far ahead, in the clearing between the trees, a group of armored cavalry was marching forward with solemnity. The man at the head rode a magnificent black horse, his dark battle robe fluttering in the forest wind. He stood tall and straight like a pine tree, with a face as stern as if carved from stone. His narrow, deep eyes held a sharp, icy gaze that seemed to defy life and death. Commander of the patrol battalion, Duan Linghan. The moment I saw that face, my anxious heart finally settled down. I took a deep breath, brushed the dead leaves from my sleeves, took Hibiscus by the hand, and pushed aside the thorns in my path. I stepped out of the dark forest and stood right in the path that the cavalry had to take. Who's there? The sergeant in the front row immediately drew his sword. Its sharp blade pointed straight at us too. Duan Linghan slightly raised his hand, and the armored soldiers behind him immediately came to a halt, their movements precise and synchronized, without a single unnecessary sound. Standing above me, he glared down at me, his gaze swept over my disheveled, though not torn, clothes, and my face, which appeared distraught yet calm. He spoke coldly. The Panlong Road has been blocked by the patrol troops. Who are you, and why are you trespassing here? I slightly bowed my head, crossing my hands at my waist, and performed the perfect greeting befitting a member of an aristocratic family. I am Song Wanming, daughter of Song Boyong, Minister of Rites. I greet you, Lord Commander. Upon hearing the words Minister of Rites, Duan Lingon's eyes narrowed slightly, and a scrutinizing look appeared in them. The women of the Song family were the supplies and servants that were robbed on the Panlong Road ahead yours. Yes. I raised my head, facing his intimidating gaze. My voice was calm and clear, without the slightest trace of panic or crying after having narrowly escaped danger. Today, my mother and I went to Hanshan Temple to offer prayers. On the way, we encountered a band of bandits. The leader of the bandits claimed to be Lei Lai. After looting our possessions, he also kidnapped my mother and took her to the deep forests in the northwest direction. Duan Lingon's hand holding the whip paused slightly. A dangerously sharp glint flashed in his deep eyes. Lei Lai was a ruthless bandit who had operated in this area for years. The patrol troops had launched a secret operation precisely to eliminate him. He glanced at me intently, as if trying to figure out how a delicate young woman could not only survive such a brutal attack, but also remember the bandit leader's name and escape route. You really have good luck. Duan Lingon's voice was low, impossible to decipher whether he was happy or angry. Few people survive where Lei Lai passes by. You managed to escape right under his nose. And you even showed us the way so clearly. I merely scared the horses to death in my desperation. By sheer luck, I managed to roll down the hillside and escape. I spoke calmly, pointing without hesitation at my muddy skirt and the scratches on the backs of my hands. Then, I changed my tone slightly, adding a hint of sincerity and seriousness to my voice. My lord, I understand how urgent military matters are. I wouldn't dare to delay your efforts to suppress the bandits, but I have a humble request. I hope you'll grant it. Duan Linghan raised his eyebrows slightly, seemingly intrigued by my request. Speak. Although I was fortunate enough to survive and not fall into the hands of the thieves, I was alone in the wilderness, in great danger, without official documentation. It will be difficult for me to prove my innocence amidst all the rumors upon returning to my household. I looked at him firmly, emphasizing each word. I implore you to have the military clerk record the exact time and place of my rescue, as well as my appearance. Also, please assign 2 soldiers to deliver this document and me back to the Song household. This will not only serve as a record of the patrol troops' efforts in my rescue, but also help preserve my reputation for the rest of my life. The air around them seemed to freeze for a moment. The several deputy generals exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for the fact that this seemingly delicate and fragile young lady, having just escaped death, didn't think of crying for help or rushing home for shelter. Instead, she calmly and resolutely established an impregnable defense of her reputation in this wilderness. Duan Linghan stared at me quietly. His scrutinizing gaze gradually turned into one filled with both admiration and curiosity. In a world where reputation was valued more than life itself, this woman's clarity of mind and determination were even more ruthless than those of many cunning politicians he had met. Approved. He turned his gaze away, his voice returning to its cold, hard tone. He then turned to his deputy and ordered, Deputy Zhang, take men to carefully document Miss Song's current condition and affix the official seal. Assign a squad of light cavalry to escort Miss Song back to the city. Understood. Duan Linghan said no more. With a sharp spur to his horse, he led the large group of armored cavalry forward like a black torrent toward the northwest. The loud clatter of hooves stirred up the fallen leaves everywhere. Watching them go, I slowly exhaled a sigh. With the support of the patrol unit and the soldiers' personal escort, there was no way those corrupt bandits could ever tarnish my reputation again. Vice General Zhang handled things with great efficiency. He not only carefully recorded the details of my escape, but also found a ox cart belonging to a nearby farmer. He covered the cart with clean blankets so that Jean and I could rest on it. As the wheels rolled along the rough dirt road, they made a monotonous creaking sound as the cart slowly moved toward the towering city gates of the capital. Sitting on the shaking cart, I gently arranged my disheveled hair. Through the gaps in the curtains, I glanced in the direction of the Song family's residence. That mansion, once seemingly magnificent and splendid, was probably now preparing to face a storm of criticism aimed at criticism labeled as damaging the family's reputation. 2 sergeants from the patrol battalion escorted the ox cart, stopping it firmly in front of the mansion's red-painted and gilded gates. Hearing that it was the patrol battalion bringing me back, my father, Song Boyong, who was receiving guests in his study, didn't even bother changing out of his official robes before rushing out to greet them along with the butler, Wanming. What's going on here? My father looked at the mud-stained hem of my skirt. His brows instinctively furrowed. What showed in his eyes first wasn't worry, but fear that our family's reputation might be damaged. I discreetly hid the coldness in my eyes, letting my eyelids redden at the right moment. Trembling slightly, I bowed to my father. Father, on our way to Hanshan Temple today, we encountered bandits on Panlong Road. I risked my life by jumping out of the carriage and rolling down the hillside to escape. Thankfully, Commander Duan of the patrol troops happened to be passing by and saved me. Lord Song, the soldier accompanying him, stepped forward with dignity, handing over the document stamped with the patrol camp seal. My commander has ordered that since Miss Song managed to escape from danger without being tainted by the thieves. This is the report prepared by the patrol camp upon investigation. I've been tasked with escorting Miss Song back to her residence, so as to prevent rumors from damaging the reputation of a noblewoman. Father took the document in hand and quickly scanned it, noting Duan Lingon's private seal and Deputy General Zhang's signature. His tense expression immediately relaxed. With this official proof, the reputation of the eldest daughter of the Shangshu family was finally preserved. He let out a long sigh of relief, bowed repeatedly to the soldier in gratitude, then lowered his voice and glanced behind me. Where's your mother? Why isn't she back with you? I lowered my eyebrows and eyes, my voice trembling just enough. The bandit leader, Lei Lai, pulled back the carriage curtain. In her panic, my mother fell out of the carriage. That thief took her away into the mountains. What? Father's face turned deathly pale. He staggered, nearly losing his composure. The head of the Shangshu family had been kidnapped in public by bandits. If such a horrible scandal became known, how could he, as the Minister of Rites, preserve his reputation? Clutching the document tightly, his chest heaving with emotion, he ordered the butler, seal off all information immediately. Tell everyone that the lady fell ill suddenly at the temple today and is resting in the guest quarters of Hanshan Temple. No one is allowed to visit her. I stood aside, head bowed, watching my father's desperate attempts to cover up the scandal and put a positive face on things. All I could feel was utter sarcasm. This was the family's reputation, which he valued so highly. Over the next 2 days, the Song household was filled with a sense of oppression. Like still water, the father pretended to be ill and stayed in his study day and night, anxiously awaiting news of the patrol's efforts to suppress the bandits. On the evening of the 3rd day, an old, unmarked black-coated carriage arrived silently at the back gate of the Song household. A very secluded entrance. Duan Linghan took control of Lei Lai's lair. Several women who were rescued were sent back to the city. Lin Wanrong, on the other hand, was brought in wrapped in a worn-out cloth blanket. 2 rough-looking women carried her onto the vehicle, as if carrying a sack of goods. Half an hour later, I was called to the main hall in the courtyard. No candles were lit inside the room. The dim light barely illuminated the surroundings. Father stood in the center of the hall, hands behind his back, his face pale as steel. The floor was in disarray, covered with broken teacups. Song Yujiao knelt in a corner, covering her mouth with a hand and sobbing quietly. The woman sitting on the ground had her hair tousled like weeds. She wore ill-fitting clothes typical of a servant. On her neck and wrists were visible bruises and red marks. There was not a trace of the dignity and grace expected of a high-ranking official. Hearing my footsteps, Lin Wanrong's vacant eyes suddenly turned toward me. The moment she saw that I was neatly dressed and unharmed, hatred burst forth from her eyes like something tangible. Her hoarse, broken voice let out a shriek as terrifying as a ghost's. "It's you, Song Wanming. It's you, you wretched woman, who pushed me off the train." She struggled to get up from the ground like a madwoman, pointing at my nose. She shrieked at her father. "Sir, it's her. She's colluded with those bandits." She deliberately pushed me at Leilai to take the blame on herself. How could she possibly be innocent? She's been to those bandit lairs. Those bandits have already ruined her. You can't believe her. Faced with such vicious accusations, I didn't show any sign of panic. I simply took a half step back and looked at her with a mixture of shock and pity. "Mother, what are you talking about? The bandits on the Panlong Road are extremely dangerous. You were startled and lost your balance, falling out of the carriage. I had to use all my strength to calm the horses so we could escape. The records of the patrol battalion clearly state the facts, and Commander Duan personally verified my innocence. How can you, because of your own misfortune, hurl such baseless accusations at your own daughter? You're lying. You're lying." Lin Wanrong was deeply hurt by the words met with misfortune. It was a nightmare that haunted her for 2 full days and nights while she was in the bandits' lair. She rushed at her father's legs, crying, "Sir, she's a vicious woman. She's ruined my reputation. Please stand up for me." "Enough." The father kicked her away, veins bulging on his forehead. He valued his reputation greatly. Now, seeing Lin Wanrong in such a state covered in bruises, acting like a drunken shrew, felt nothing but disgust and coldness. "Wanming has official documents stamped with the patrol battalion seal as proof. Yet you act like a madwoman here. You were kidnapped by those beasts for 2 whole days. What kind of horrible things happened to you? You know best. Don't you think you've already brought shame enough to this family?" Lin Wanrong was knocked to the ground by that kick. She stared blankly at her father's disgusted expression, finally realizing her predicament. Without that official document proving her innocence, and with those unbearable scars on her body, her words could only be seen by her father as those of a woman who had lost all virtue, trying to cover up her guilt with vicious accusations. "Take the lady away and lock her in the Buddha hall. No one is allowed to see her without my permission." The father closed his eyes wearily and waved his hand, as if even looking at her once would contaminate his eyes. 2 burly women stepped forward, covering Lin Wanrong's mouth as she screamed in despair. They dragged her away roughly. I watched the scene in silence. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Song Yujiao, who had been kneeling in the corner, huddled together. She didn't try to stop the women from taking away her mother. Instead, she clenched the silk handkerchief in her hands tightly. Slowly, she raised her head. In her usually timid eyes, there was now a vicious, cold glint. "In my past life, I was kidnapped by bandits and suffered inhumane torments in that dark, hellish place. After much struggle, I managed to escape back to the Song family's residence. But what greeted me were Lin Wanrong's cruel mockery, Song Yujiao's disdainful looks, and my father's cruel act of giving me a cup of poison, all in order to preserve the family's reputation. My memories were completely lost amidst the excruciating pain and the gloomy, cold conditions of that shed. In other words, starting tonight, I know nothing about all the changes that will take place in this capital city, about the shifts in the court hierarchy, or about the intricate schemes within the palaces. Having lost the most important advantage of being reborn, I no longer have any foresight to rely on in every step I take. All I can count on is the intelligent heart within my own body, to fight heat-in against those ruthless wolves and tigers who will stop at nothing to get what they want. Miss Mu Jin lifted the heavy felt curtain and carefully carried in a steaming bowl of bird's nest. She leaned closer to me and lowered her voice. "The second miss has gone to the study, in the front yard again, to bring supper to the master. Since the lady was confined to the prayer hall these days, the second miss hasn't shown any signs of pleading for mercy. Instead, she goes to the master every day, showing her filial devotion in various ways. It seems that her servile behavior has become even more extreme than before." Without any surprise, I took the delicate white porcelain bowl and gently stirred the clear soup with a silver spoon. Song Yujiao has always been a self-serving and calculating person. Lin Wanrong has now been completely ruined, becoming a pawn that can be discarded at will. Naturally, Song Yujiao must quickly draw a line between herself and Lin Wanrong, and cling tightly to her father as a means of securing her own position in this household. The more obedient and filial she appears on the surface, the deeper her schemes truly are. The next morning, as dawn was just breaking, my father ordered that Song Yujiao and I be summoned to his study. Scent of sandalwood filled the study. Father sat upright in the rosewood armchair, his brows slightly furrowed. As if pondering something, Song Yujiao stood by his side, dressed in a simple, pale blue dress with floral patterns. She wore only a plain silver brooch in her hair, with no other decorations. Her eyes were slightly red, giving her a pitiable appearance of someone who cared deeply for her mother. In 3 more days, it will be the spring flower banquet held by the princess's residence. My father pushed 2 gilded name cards to the edge of the table. His gaze lingered on me for a moment, filled with scrutiny. These days, there's been a lot of gossip about your mother's sudden illness. Some people have even spoken ill of our Song family's reputation. Take this opportunity of the banquet to attend together. You 2 sisters, Wanming. Make sure Yu Jiao and you appear properly. Let those gossips see that the legitimate daughters of the Song family remain dignified and honorable, and should not be insulted lightly. My daughter understands. I will not fail to fulfill my father's wishes. I lowered my gaze and bowed respectfully. Without arrogance or subservience, Song Yujiao quickly bowed down after Ying. Her voice was delicate and soft, as if she might be blown over by the slightest breeze. Your Highness, the Crown Princess, always emphasizes propriety. A few days ago, Sister suffered such a shock on Panlong Road. I'm afraid Sister isn't fully composed yet. At the flower banquet, if Sister loses her composure in front of the royal relatives, it could give them an opportunity to make accusations against her. Perhaps it would be better if I spent more time in Sister's courtyard these days, to help relieve her of some of the burdens related to these rules and etiquettes. Her words seemed to express sisterly affection, but in reality, every word pierced her father's heart. It implied that my encounter with the bandits was a potential threat, and that it could bring shame to the family and embarrass us in front of the powerful. My expression remained unchanged. I tilted my head slightly toward her, a faint smile appearing on my lips. Sister, you're overthinking things. That day, Commander Duan from the patrol unit personally sent troops to escort me back to the mansion. Even he, who's such a strict military officer, praised me for remaining calm during the crisis. The Princess Royal, having served under the late emperor as a valiant woman, surely appreciates those who remain composed in difficult situations. As for you, with mother being so ill, you still forced yourself to smile and attend the banquet. Your self-restraint and filial piety truly make me feel ashamed. If you really want to help me, why not stay at home, copy more Buddhist scriptures, and pray for mother's recovery? That would show true sincerity. Song Yujiao's delicate expression stiffened slightly. Her fingers, gripping the silk handkerchief, tightened abruptly, her knuckles turning white. Yet, she forced herself to swallow her tears and looked at her father with eyes filled with sorrow. The father clearly didn't want to listen to these petty arguments in the study. Already upset, he waved his hand and said sternly, "Enough, all of you. Go and get ready. The new spring silk delivered to the sewing room can be picked out by each of you for tailoring. Don't let the Shangshu family lose face in front of the princess." Upon returning to the moon-embracing pavilion, Aunt Zhou, the supervisor of the sewing room, was already waiting in the corridor. Behind her, a maid carried several large lacquered trays, on which several beautifully colored shoe silks were neatly arranged. "Madam, the second young lady sent word earlier. She said that, worried about her mother, she shouldn't wear anything too flashy. So, she chose that plain-colored Yunying silk. She specifically instructed me to save the most precious Haitang Chenchui shoe brocade for you." Auntie Zhou approached with a beaming smile. My gaze fell on the brocade with a red background, intricately embroidered with crabapple patterns using gold and silver threads. It was indeed a rare and exquisitely beautiful material, but at a time like this, would Song Yujiao actually be kind enough to give me the opportunity to shine? That certainly didn't match her vindictive and malicious nature. I stepped aside, leaving everyone else behind. I went over to the brocade by myself, bent down, and carefully examined the patterns formed by the interwoven silk threads. Then I got even closer, breathing in the scent. Beyond the natural odor of the silk dyes, there was a faint, almost imperceptible sweet fragrance. This wasn't the scent of ordinary incense. It seemed more like pollen that had been ground into powder and mixed with water, then somehow seeped into the silk threads during the weaving process. In the warm spring of March, the imperial garden of the princess's residence was filled with blooming flowers, marking the peak season for bees and butterflies. If one wore clothes soaked in a special sweet fragrance to a banquet, standing among the flowers would likely attract swarms of stinging bees. This would not only result in a humiliating escape in front of everyone, but could also lead to disfigurement or even death. Hibiscus. I straightened up, my gaze turning icy. I took out a piece of silver from my sleeve and shoved it into her hand. My voice was barely audible. Take this now. Leave through the back door. Go to the herbal medicine shop in the southern part of the city. Find a reliable old doctor there. Have him scrape the hidden lines on this brocade and examine it to see if anything like bee-attracting powder has been mixed in. Half an hour later, Hibiscus returned, pale as a ghost, through the back door, clutching a crumpled prescription in her palm. Miss, the old doctor has determined what it is. Mujin's voice trembled as she handed me the prescription. It's Zue Guxiang from the southern border. This fragrance dissipates when heated. Alone. It smells sweet, but when it's in the midst of flowers, it attracts the most poisonous red-tailed bees. If someone is stung several times, at worst, their face will fester. In the worst-case scenario, they'll suffer from high fever and die. Miss, this is a plan to kill you. I clenched that prescription in my hand and sneered. Song Yujiao was truly ruthless, using the pretext of my distress and fear. She deliberately gave me that shoe brocade which seemed valuable on the surface but actually hid deadly dangers. She knew full well that after I embarrassed or even disfigured myself in front of the Princess Royal, my father would completely discard me. Go to the warehouse and bring back 2 pounds of aged wormwood and half a pound of alum. I lit the prescription by the candle on the desk, watching as it turned to ashes. Tonight, soak this shoe brocade in wormwood water several times. Then steam it in boiling water. Make sure to remove that sweet fragrance completely. Don't discard the water used for washing. Instead, boil it down over low heat and pour it into that small white porcelain snuff bottle. Since my sister gave me such a generous gift, as her older sister, I naturally need to return it exactly as it was. The next day, under the pretext of discussing the details of the banquet, I went to Song Yujiao's Lan Yugu. She was trying on a plain silver square pendant in front of a bronze mirror. When she saw me enter, she quickly put on a gentle and obedient smile. Taking advantage of the moment, she turned around to fetch tea for me. I poured the entire contents of the half bottle of concentrated Zue Guxiang perfume onto the inside of her cloud-patterned silk dress and on the tips of her shoes, which were embroidered with winter jasmine flowers. The colorless and tasteless liquid quickly seeped into the precious silk, disappearing without a trace. 3 days later, at the Crown Princess's residence, a banquet to enjoy the spring flowers was held. In the imperial garden, beautiful flowers competed for beauty, and the scent of fine clothes filled the air. The Princess Royal sat gracefully in a pavilion by the water, chatting leisurely with several noblewomen. I stood quietly at her side, dressed in the brocade gown spring slumber of the crabapple treated with wormwood and perfumed with the cool scent of pine and cypress. I made no attempt to draw attention to myself. Song Yujiao wore a silk dress adorned with patterns of moonlight and clouds, looking extremely delicate and charming. Among all the gorgeous ladies around her, she stood out in her own way. Under the pretext of admiring the flowers, she gently took my arm and led me deeper into the garden, toward the peony pavilion, where bees and butterflies were most abundant. Sister, look how beautifully that Wei Zi flower is in bloom. Song Yujiao pointed at a cluster of blooming peonies. her eyes reflecting a mix of barely concealed excitement and malice. As noon approached, a gentle breeze blew, and the sunlight grew more intense. The sweet fragrance, hidden deep within the air, began to rise with the heat. Just then, a spine-chilling buzzing sound suddenly came from deep within the bushes. At first, it was just a few black and yellow red-tailed wasps hovering among the branches. Then, like a cloud of darkness, hundreds of venomous wasps rushed in from all directions. Ah! Song Yujiao suddenly let go of my hand. She wanted to take a step back and watch me die. But to her horror, the poisonous bees completely ignored her in her red clothes. Instead, as if attracted by some deadly temptation, they rushed frantically at the hem of her dress and the tips of her shoes. I quickly covered my mouth and nose with the wide sleeves of my clothes, then stepped back several times, hiding behind several flowering trees. Help! Get away from me, please! Leave me alone! Song Yujiao screamed in agony, frantically flailing her arms to swat the venomous bees off her body. But the drunk bone fragrance had already seeped into her clothes. More and more bees gathered around her, covering her skirt and even crawling up her collar. In pain, she rolled around on the ground. Her neatly coiled hair was now tousled, and her silver pendant fell to the ground. She resembled a desperate, mad woman. The noblewomen and wealthy ladies by the waterside heard the commotion and screamed in panic, creating complete chaos. The crown princess's expression darkened, and she ordered the palace guards to step forward and restore order. The guards lit torches made of mugwort to repel insects. It took a full incense stick's worth of time to drive away those wild red-tailed bees. Song Yujiao collapsed in the mess of withered flowers and muddy ground. Her delicate and lovely cheeks were swollen like a pig's head, covered with horrible red rashes and bloody wounds. She convulsed violently. Through her swollen eyes, which were barely open, she stared fixedly at me, who remained unharmed. From her throat came heavy gasps. It's you. You're the one who ruined me. What's wrong with my sister? I put on an expression of horror and distress at the right moment. Ignoring the people around me who tried to stop me, I rushed forward, but I stopped 3 steps away from her. My voice filled with anguish. How could so many poisonous bees appear out of nowhere? Hurry! Call for the imperial physician. The old maid serving the princess stepped forward, covering her nose in disgust. She picked up a torn piece of fabric from Song Yujiao's dress, brought it to her nose, and her expression changed instantly. Your Highness, this Miss Song's clothes are contaminated with the poisonous substance drunkards sent from the southern border. This poison is extremely harmful. If the wind hadn't blown in another direction today, all the nobles present would have been affected. Upon hearing this, the crown princess slammed the jade ruby she was playing with onto the table, producing a dull thud. Her gaze towards Song Yujiao was icy and piercing. Song Boyong has truly raised a fine daughter. How dare she bring such despicable poison to my banquet? What should have been a pleasant spring celebration ended in disaster when the second daughter of the minister's family was poisoned. The guards from the princess's palace threw her back at the Song family's residence like a discarded bag. I sat in the carriage on the way back, listening to Song Yujiao's faint moans of pain and fever from the next carriage, while my own expression remained calm as still water. As soon as the carriage returning to the mansion came to a stop at the corner gate, the heavens of the minister's residence completely collapsed. The guards of the princess's residence didn't even give Song Yujiao a second glance. They threw her at the entrance, as if she were some worthless item. In front of all the servants, they conveyed the princess's words coldly. Lord Song knows how to raise daughters well. Yet, she dared to bring forbidden drugs from the southern border into the imperial garden. The princess declares that such behavior is truly astonishing. These words were like a deafening slap, hitting father's face, which he valued above all else. Inside the main hall, the atmosphere was so cold and tense that it seemed like ice might form in the air. The imperial physician was administering acupuncture and detoxification treatments to Song Yujiao in a separate room. The increasingly loud screams pierced everyone's eardrums like dull knives. The father sat stiffly in his chair, veins bulging on the back of his hands. He had crushed a crack into the teacup from sheer frustration. Before long, the imperial physician emerged from the inner room. shaking his head. He didn't even dare to charge too much for his services. All he said was, "The poison has penetrated the muscles and destroyed the patient's appearance. It's a miracle that she's still alive." With that, he hurriedly picked up his medicine box and left. "Drag that wretched bastard out here." The father violently smashed the teacup onto the bluestone floor, causing shards of porcelain to fly everywhere. Two maids carried Song Yujiao, whose entire body was covered in white gauze with only her red, swollen eyes visible. They dumped her limp body in the middle of the hall. She could barely kneel properly. But the moment she saw me sitting nearby, she let out a hoarse scream, like a beast on the verge of death. "Father, it's Song Wanming. She's the one who did this to me. I put drunkard scent in her blossom of the crabapple drink. How could it end up on my clothes? She must have secretly switched them. She wants to destroy me." When people are in extreme despair and pain, they often lose even their most basic sense of reason. Upon hearing these words, the room fell dead silent. I didn't even need to say anything. I simply raised my gaze slightly and looked at her with eyes filled with utter compassion. In an instant, his father's face turned from a ghastly green to a deathly pale. Then, uncontrollable rage erupted within him. He stood up abruptly, rushed down the steps, and kicked Song Yujiao hard in the chest. "You poisonous woman. You admitted it yourself that it was you who bought those forbidden drugs from southern border. It was you who tried to murder your own sister at the princess's banquet." "No. That's not true. Father, please listen to my explanation." Song Yujiao was so shocked by the kick that she vomited. She finally realized what fatal truth she had blurted out in her panic. In a frantic attempt to stop her father, she grabbed his clothes. "It's she who's full of schemes." That medicine was clearly. "Sister, your words are truly strange." I slowly stood up, smoothing my dust-free skirt. My voice was calm, yet every word cut like a blade. "That spring slumber fabric was personally ordered by you to be kept for me by the sewing room. I thought the material was too precious to handle properly, so I had Muhyujin soak it in wormwood water and then steam and wash it 3 times. All to keep its elegance intact. I grew up in seclusion, not even knowing where the southern border was. If it weren't for the eunuch who served the princess, I'd never have even heard of Zue Guxiang. Since you knew this poison was hidden in my clothes, why didn't you stop me before the banquet? Why did you still accompany me to the peony pavilion so affectionately? With all these schemes, do you really want to destroy me? Or do you want to bring shame upon the entire Shangshu family in the princess's eyes? You're lying. You obviously know everything." Song Yujiao shook her head frantically. Her hairpins were nowhere to be seen. She resembled a madwoman who had lost her senses. "Enough." The father trembled with anger, his fingers shaking as he pointed at Song Yujiao. What really mattered to him wasn't which daughter had been wronged, but who threatened his position as an official. Song Yujiao wasn't only stupid enough to poison someone on royal territory, but also foolish enough to harm herself in the process. As a result, he was publicly reprimanded by the princess. This had crossed his intolerable limits. "Hibiscus." I ignored Song Yujiao's persistent nagging and simply called out her name calmly. Hibiscus immediately stepped forward and presented a confession bearing the lady's red clay seal with both hands. "Your lordship, after encountering danger, the young lady has been extremely cautious. Today's incident was far too terrifying. I mustered the courage to question Chui Er, the young lady's personal maid, unable to withstand the torture. Chui Er has confessed. This drunkard scent was purchased 3 days ago by the young lady's order, using the lady's identification to buy it from a spice shop in the southern part of the city. Here's Chui Er's signature, and the shopkeeper can confirm its authenticity at any time. The evidence is irrefutable. There's no room for denial." Father stared at that confession. The last trace of warmth in his eyes vanished completely. He glared coldly down at the bloody mess on the ground, his voice icy. "Pass my orders. The second young lady has suddenly fallen ill. Her appearance is beyond recognition. There's a risk of spreading the disease to the other members of the household. Prepare a carriage immediately and send her to Han Mountain Villa, 50 miles outside the city, for recovery. Without my permission, she shall not set foot outside the villa under any circumstances." Han Mountain Villa was a place where the imperial household kept those servants who had contracted plagues and were doomed to die. There were no doctors or medicine, only waiting for death. No, father, you can't do this to me. I'm your own daughter. Song Yujiao let out shrill cries of despair. She kowtowed frantically, her forehead hitting the blue bricks and leaving bloody marks. Mother, save me, mother. Drag it away. Get it into the carriage right now. The father turned away in disgust, unable to bear even a second glance at it. The old woman roughly grabbed Song Yujiao by the arms and stuffed a piece of rag tightly over her mouth. Her eyes, filled with hatred and despair, stared intently at me in the final moment before she was dragged outside. It was as though she wanted to engrave my face into her memory, so that she could return as a vengeful spirit to haunt me. I stood quietly under the eaves, watching coldly as the dilapidated carriage left through the back gate overnight. In the night wind, I could faintly hear the sound of wooden doors being violently smashed in the direction of the Buddha Hall in the backyard. Within that dead, oppressive mansion, there hung a sense of despair and bloodshed. The sound of breaking glass in the direction of the Buddha Hall was particularly jarring against the night breeze. Soon after, came the terrified screams of the old women. Lord, it's terrible, the lady has gone mad. She used broken porcelain shards to wound the maid who was guarding her, then rushed outside. The butler rushed into the main hall, stumbling and falling to his knees at his father's feet. The father's brow was furrowed in anger. Before he could speak, a black figure resembling a withered ghost rushed through the beaded curtains of the main hall. Lin Wanrong had her hair tousled and disheveled. The once luxurious brocade robe embroidered with gold and intricate patterns was now torn to shreds, stained with what appeared to be blood either from the old woman or from herself. She clenched a sharp piece of broken porcelain in her hand, her eyes blood-red, like a vengeful ghost emerging from the depths of hell. Song Boyong, you heartless beast! Lin Wanrong screamed hysterically, pointing at her father sitting in the armchair. Yu Jiao is your own flesh and blood. How can you, for the sake of that official hat on your head, send her to that deadly place in Han Mountain Villa to wait for death? How cruel you are! Shut up, you ignorant, poisonous woman. The father slammed the table so hard that the remaining tea spilled everywhere. She's provoked the crown princess. If she isn't severely punished, do you want the entire Shangshu mansion to suffer for her stupidity? Someone, tie up this madwoman. Just as a few maids stepped forward, Lin Wanrong pressed the broken porcelain shards against her own carotid artery and screamed loudly. Who dares to come near? Song Boyong, you forced Yu Jiao to death. Today, I'll die right here in this hall. Tomorrow, the imperial censorate will learn of the scandal, the minister's concubine killing his wife and forcing her to death. Let's see if you can still hold your position as an official after this. Father's face turned ashen in an instant, out of fear of making a mistake. He froze on the spot. Seeing this, Lin Wanrong's frantic gaze suddenly shifted, fixing intently on me, who stood in the corner, looking calm. Her eyes were filled with deadly hatred. It's you, Song Wanming. It's you, you wretched woman, who schemed against Yu Jiao. Why didn't you die in those bandit lairs along the Panlong Road? Why do you have to come back and haunt me and my daughter? She let out a shrill, eerie scream, abandoning her threat against her father. She raised the sharp broken porcelain shard and rushed at me without hesitation. Protect the young lady, Mujin cried out, instinctively standing in front of me, but I simply pulled the hibiscus plant aside slightly. Without stepping back, I watched coldly as Lin Wanrong, just a step away from me, was kicked hard in the knees by the servant who had finally come to his senses. She fell heavily right at my feet. Mother's words truly hurt your daughter deeply. I looked down at her from above, my voice as gentle as the spring breeze, yet each word was like a knife, piercing through the weakest defenses of her heart. Your daughter used your own token to purchase the forbidden medicine from southern border. She herself poisoned the crown princess's residence. I was simply lucky enough to escape unharmed. If mother truly thinks your daughter is alone and helpless at Han Mountain Villa, then as her biological mother, you should ask father to allow you to take care of her there day and night. That would truly show true maternal love, wouldn't it? Lin Wanrong suddenly raised her head and stared at me in disbelief. In that moment, she understood the mockery in my eyes. She refused to go, though she kept saying that she would do anything for her daughter. Deep down, she still craved the glory and wealth that came with being the mistress of the Shangshu family. She would never go to a place where people died from plague like that. These words were not just meant for Lin Wanrong, but also for her father. The father looked at Lin Wanrong, who was throwing a tantrum on the ground. The last trace of hesitation in his eyes turned into cold murderous intent. A woman who was no longer useful, had angered the royal family, and might go mad at any moment, thus ruining the family's reputation. Must not be kept alive. Since the attack on Lady Panlong Road, she's been in a state of extreme shock. She's suffered from insanity. Today, she suddenly fell ill with a severe emergency. The father slowly stood up, his voice carrying a terrifying calmness. He turned to the butler and said, "Go and bring me the celadone medicine bottle from the hidden compartment in my study. Let Lady Panlong die with dignity." Lin Wanrong's body stiffened suddenly. A strange gagging sound came from her throat. She looked at her father in terror. You want to kill me, Song Boyong. How dare you? Pour it down," the father said, turning his back and refusing to look at her again. The butler quickly brought over a cup of tea mixed with colorless liquid. Two burly women held Lin Wanrong's limbs firmly, lifted her chin, and forced the entire contents of the cup down her throat. Lin Wanrong rolled and convulsed violently on the ground. She clutched her own neck with both hands, her nails leaving bloody scratches on her throat. Her bloodshot eyes stared at me intently, as if trying to utter a final curse. But in the end, all that came out was mouthfuls of black blood. After a series of violent spasms, she finally stopped breathing. I stood there, quietly watching the body on the ground, which was gradually becoming cold. There was no fear, no sense of triumph after avenging a grievance, only a deep sense of peace and relief. In my past life, I was held down by those two old women as my father forced me to drink the poisonous drink he had prepared to cover up the family's shame. The excruciating pain was the last thing I remember from that life. Now, the same method of death has been inflicted upon those who caused this suffering in the first place. It's the cycle of karma. The debts of my past life have finally been settled tonight. A faint bluish hue appeared on the horizon, marking the end of the long night. I stepped over the threshold and took a deep breath of the cool morning air. I knew that I no longer had any prophetic insights to rely on regarding memories and information from my past life. Everything would have to be figured out through my own efforts. Careful planning. But I'm no longer afraid. Without the cheat of memories from my past life, I'm still Song Wanming. I can still use this 7 orifices precious shirt to carve out a path of my own in this bustling yet cruel world. The story is over. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.